Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, getting started, but you weren't sure if you should just rent it out or if you should do Airbnb or maybe some sort of midterm rental for traveling nurses or what would produce the most money? I'm going to give you my take from experience. Guys, my channel is small enough that I can answer your questions. So if you have any questions about this video, write them in at the end. I ask that you please watch the whole video before asking the questions to make sure I haven't already answered it. But I'm happy to do that and give you all the advice I can. In fact, it might lead to more pointed videos for you guys in the future. And in exchange, I just ask that you please subscribe. And I'll start with the conversation I had at Starbucks this morning. There's a young lady in there who her and her fiance are looking to start investing, and she asked me for advice from time to time. She knows I own rentals in the area, and she was wondering if it wouldn't be smarter to just have start with Airbnb on her house, and she knows that's supposed to be more rent. And I just gave her my experience, told her to do what she wanted, that either way she would end up learning, but that when I do the analysis of the properties that I have and take into account some of the practicalities, it doesn't always shake out that Airbnb is going to make more sense, and here's why. The properties that I have are in a nice area. I can actually demand high credit scores. I can get tenants in there that I know are going to take care of the place, and I don't have to think about it very much. Unless something breaks, and even then, a lot of times I have a handyman and I have, HVAC guys and stuff from when I flipped houses. I kind of have a roster that I can send out. But I'm comfortable managing those properties because of the type of people that I'm dealing with. So I don't have to have a property management company, and that means I'm not going to lose 10% off the top. It also means I'm going to have very little vacancy. People rush to get into these houses, especially before the school year starts, because they want to be in this school district, which is nice. I've actually lined up all my leases. I make them turn over in the summer so that when I do lose a person, I have people competing. I can get higher rent. I can get them in there quicker. And because it's my properties, I take care of my properties. A lot of them I actually lived in long enough to fix them up. And another reason I can get a premium for them. When I go in and put the numbers in to convert some of these into Airbnbs, I have to consider that I'm going to have to hire people. I'm going to have to hire people for cleaning. There's going to be a headache cost associated with it. So if I hire out a management company to take care of it, that's going to be at least 10%. And there's going to be more for, you have to treat it like a hotel. Now you're dealing with a business. You've got to restock. You got to deal with the short-term tenant complaints. You've got to make sure that you're on top of the advertising and the photographs. You've got to furnish it. So there's an upfront cost that you're going to have to recoup. So before any additional cash flow you think you might get is going to pull ahead of what it would as a conventional rental, it's going to have to make enough money to make up for all the additional upfront costs that you had in furnishing the place. So when I put that all in, it's not enough. I've sat and done the math in the spreadsheet and put them side by side. And even though there's the potential, if I keep it full, that I will end up with a little more cash flow, when I consider the additional headaches that I'm going to go through, it's honestly not worth it, because I want my mind free to accumulate more real estate. If you wanted to make a real business out of it, if you started with this and you had a lot of skill, you could do that. You could even do it for other people if you had good systems and good people in place, and maybe take a management fee for helping them manage these short-term rentals. But my suggestions on this site a lot of times are going to be geared towards what I know is going to get people started and not burn them out. Because the best plan, the one that might be able to squeeze the most milk out of it, is not the one that you want to go with. You want to go with the one that you're going to stick to, and that's going to become a lifetime habit. And most of us are comfortable with single family homes and the idea of signing an annual lease. And, she was looking at potentially getting a fourplex. And she's like, well, I could house hack this thing where I'm living in one unit and then I'm renting out the other 3. But where we live, the fourplexes are not in nice areas. You're going to definitely want to hire a property manager to deal with it. they're going to not, they don't care about getting maximum rent in the same way you do when it's your property, because they're taking 10% of that. And, little fluctuations and a few $100s cash flow doesn't make a big difference to their 10% that they take. So there's going to be that factor there. It's notorious around here, poor property management companies that don't fix things in time. When you do have a real issue that you'd want to get fixed, and you end up with property damage and insurance claims. Beside the point, this is in an area of town where you have higher vacancy. So you're going to have the kind of tenants that end up with the police being called, issues, damaging the property, and then turnover can be a problem. You're going to end up with some of them skipping out, and you're going to have vacancy. So by the time you take the 10% off the top and consider all those other factors, you're not really making more than you would make on having a nicer single family home in the nicer area of town, in the nicer school districts. So my suggestion to her was to be active, be involved, and manage your own properties. Get it in a little nicer area where you can demand a higher credit score. The reason I like the credit score as one of the main criteria is someone doesn't accidentally get a very high credit score. That means that they've thought about it and it's important to them, and there's something you actually have to hold against them, that you would report any of their non-performance to the credit bureau, and someone with a very high credit score cares about that sort of thing. So by avoiding those issues that can kind of sink your profitability, it keeps you rolling. It keeps you wanting to accumulate a portfolio. Maybe in your area of town, it's not like that. Maybe there's duplexes, triplexes, or even fourplexes in an area that is nice and where you would live. And in that case, house hacking might make a lot of sense. But always consider the type of tenant that you're attracting and the value of your time in the equation, and if it's going to put you in a position where you're going to want to accumulate more. You don't want to get burned out on real estate because you went for what was theoretically the most profitable on paper, and then you end your real estate investing career before it even really got off the ground. Lastly, I just want to acknowledge that interest rates are high right now. It is difficult. If you're watching real estate investing tutorials and things, and you're thinking, I don't know how this could work. It might not at the moment. I'm actually not buying more rentals at the moment. The house that I'm in, I'm actually fixing up with the intent to rent it out. And I'm just waiting. While I live in these, that's why I like to live in them. I get an interest rate based on owner occupying. Sometimes I'll wait until interest rates are good so I can refinance, get that payment as low as possible before I decide to move out and then rent it. And so maybe there's areas of the country where you can still get enough cash flow for now. I'm not all about cash flow. You're not going to get rich a lot of times just off the cash flow. You're going to get rich off of your portfolio appreciating over the years as dollars inflate and become less valuable. And your mortgages stay the same based on yesterday's dollars. That gap grows, that cash flow will become significant then, but mostly it's the worth of the property, the equity that grows, that's going to actually make you wealthy over time. That's another thing about investing in nicer areas, is you can get better appreciation over time, a lot of these times. So look at real estate also as kind of a lifetime play. When prices are good and no one's buying, it might be a good time for you to buy. When interest rates are low later as an incentive to get people buying, a lot of times there's people buying and driving the prices up, and it might not be when you want to buy, but that's a good time for you to refinance and get your payments as small as possible. And then you can move out and you can play a waiting game during periods like this where both prices and interest rates are simultaneously high, and then capitalize on the times in your life when it's not. But I would suggest just moving into your own single family homes in an area that's desirable and renting it out when you leave, such that you have some cash flow, enough to save up in a separate account so that when the roof or HVAC inevitably has an issue, you have the money sitting there to repair it. Don't count that money as yours. Just count that as something that's making sure that it takes care of itself, so that money's not coming out of your pocket. And again, you don't get burned out and decide you don't want to do it. Because over the course of a lifetime, if you're accumulating real estate, then when it comes time to retire, even if you choose to do it early, the real estate can provide both cash flow that will become significant over the course of many years, but also it'll provide equity in these properties that has been growing that you can pull out at times when the interest rates are very low. And by taking out that loan, that payment is still going to be covered by the tenants that are in it. And you now have this chunk of cash to use for other investments or something that you want in your life. Only there's no taxable event in that equation. You didn't make an actual capital gain, so there's nothing to be taxed. So there's a lot to go into when it comes to real estate. This is part of what I covered in my conversation with her. And I'm realizing when people in my actual life are asking for advice, it's probably good for me to recount the conversation that I had and pass it along to you guys, because that's what this channel is all about. Is I say muscle and money, but it's like health and wealth is the other part of that equation, and just personal growth. So I think real estate has a place for everyone to some extent. Even if you want to skew more towards riskier investments or put more into your business, having some real estate as a hedge against inflation is going to remain a smart thing to do throughout your lifetime.